Go ahead.
The reason I was upset wasn't fixed, but it was still answered for me in a way that was meaningful and it was needed.
Mhm. So let me just say something about that before you, Ruthie. That makes sense to me too, because the sanctuary is called sanctuary for a reason. It's a kind of retreat or shelter from all of the busyness and cats jumping on you and dogs barking and kids wanting something and traffic and all the stuff from the outside world that might get in the way of being calm and being open to prayer. Nature has that effect for people too, because then you also don't have traffic and your daily concerns of like, oh, I got to pay this bill, it's late, and all these other kinds of things. Norm? Norm?
Oh, I'm sorry. I have a couple of thoughts, and I'm glad I waited to talk because I heard all these other folks say what they thought. The prayer that does the most for me is not the Mishbeach or the Kaddish. For some reason, that's just not a critical thing for me. Of course, I'm concerned about the people we're praying for, and my thoughts go out to them. But the Via Hafta is the whole Shema is the prayer that really gets me going. And then I guess we don't do it that much, and I forgot the term, but when you do the Amida, not the first page, the second page, it's like
Dusha.
the Kedusha. That gets me also. That resonates with me very strongly when I say that. But the way I interpreted your question when you first started this strain, this part of the conversation, I think going to temple as often as I do or have in my life, it made me much more comfortable or even understood the concept that I could talk with God. And learning more about the religion from, like, say, the Torah study, I even learned there's an aspect where you can negotiate with God. And I don't think I've ever negotiated, I guess we all do. If you do this, God, if you get me out of this jam or whatever it is, then I'll say 4 Hail Marys and, won't eat bacon for a month or something like that. Some silly stuff like that.
The Jewish way to do that negotiation is that you're going to give tzedakah.
Well,
that's the traditional Jewish way to do that negotiation.
Okay.
In fact, the Yisker service, if you think of, I don't know if you look at the English when we do the private part of the Yisker service, we're praying for the various people who died. And every paragraph ends that and I will give tzedakah in their name.
Well, David, would it be that far off historically to think in terms that the origin of the prayer before they did tzedakah was that I'd make a sacrifice in their name?
Yeah.
I don't know, but that makes sense.
Yeah.
Could be. So let's shift gears. Last comment, Ruthie, and then we'll shift.
Okay. I was thinking prayer in the sanctuary. When it means something to me, it's when it means nothing. The actual meaning of everything I'm saying. I'm so familiar with the prayers that it sometimes it may be coming out of my mouth, but it's not coming. It's coming more out of my inner being than my intellectual brain. It just relaxes me. It's almost like a meditative, no matter what the song is or something. When I hear that familiar song and stuff, my brain is kind of just somewhere else. And really, if you ask me, it was almost like a semi-trance. And that's when I'm sometimes praying from the context of being in a temple and hearing the prayers that I know so well that come out of my mouth. but don't come out of my soul and my heart rather than my meaningful intellectual brain.
Thank you, Ruthie. That is a really important comment, because that is an important strategy that people come to on their own, or sometimes through instruction, that the words of prayer are often more useful as a mantra kind of thing, as a meditative device, than what the actual meaning is, or dwelling on the actual meaning, or at least in detail. Because what you're talking about is getting to a place of feeling rather than thinking. When we read words on a page, it sort of triggers that part of the brain that we're going to think rather than feel. But if we're repeating them, or they're very familiar and we go over them, then we could get to that more feeling kind of place. Yes, Norman?
I just made a connection while Ruthie and you were talking about something that happened to me. I was in a room with a whole bunch of rabbis, and we were doing the morning minyan. And these guys, it was all men, and these guys were well advanced than I was and am about everything Judaic. And when we were doing the prayer, the liturgy of the morning minyan, I'm the only one that's not reading. All the other rabbis were reading the book, and they know these prayers. They say them every day. They say them a couple of times a day. Some of them, they know them by heart, but I'm the only one that's doing it by heart. They're all reading. And I asked one of them afterwards, I said, surely you know these prayers. Why are you even looking in the book? And the response was, you need to be reading it, because that's where you're really making your connection. If it's just off the top of your head and from memory, and I think that's what you and Ruthie were just saying, it doesn't connect as much. You're not participating as much. It's not as first person into it. So I don't know. I just made that connection.
It's a different,
Yeah. There are very different views. Like I've spoken with people who have that view, and I've spoken with some very spiritually connected with people who feel that it's much more powerful for them to memorize and do it from memory. So don't think that there's one answer, is all I'm saying. So I just find this fascinating and would like us to keep in mind as we're studying liturgy, because you've all sort of requested to study, like, why do we do the prayers in the order that they are and that kind of thing, to think about, as we're doing this, how does all this relate to prayers from the heart? And one answer that occurs to me is that all of the prayers from the heart that we're talking about, I'm not talking about the ones that you've shared that are based on something that happened in temple or from the Siddur. The prayers like when someone is sick, or if someone's in a jam, or those kinds of things. There's nothing particularly Jewish about them. They're universal. Like if I'm Hindu or Muslim or Catholic and my significant other gets hurt, I'm going to say pretty much the same prayer from the heart that a Jewish person would. That's one thing. Should prayer have something particularly Jewish? The Siddur comes to answer that question. Like another thing is that someone, I don't know if someone had said that, there's a community aspect. And there's a tension here, right, between the prayer that will make me as an individual moved and open to talking with God, and on the one hand, and on the other hand, praying together and being sort of on the same page as other people and doing something Jewish. So Yes, Ruthie.
That reminds me of saying Jewish and non-Jewish and the connection with God. I forgot what holy site I was in Czechoslovakia, but it was where a saint did miracles and all that. And there were really crowds to get in and all that. And we were Fulbright, so they let us right in. As soon as you entered that space, and it was certainly very Christian, you almost felt God in the room. Because it was full of lots of true believers is probably not the right term, but Christians who were there really thinking this was the site miracles happen. And I too, not being Christian, actually had that sense that there was something special in the air, which was weird as I'm thinking of that experience I had. I think it was Cheshikova, but I'm not too sure, somewhere there.
Mhm.
That's not the relevant thing. So there wasn't this religion over that religion. It was just the presence of something special was there.
Mhm. Okay. Natalie?
It's something else that we have experienced is when you travel and you're in Poland or you're in France and you go to a temple and you don't know these people, you don't know the language or anything, but you feel some connection because you're all Jewish.
Mhm.
There's just something there that binds you.
Genes, yeah.
Right.
Totally agree with that. I've had that experience. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had that experience in several foreign
Yeah.
countries, like in Turkey. I mean, Istanbul, go to a temple and the tunes are a little different, but I could totally follow the service and relate to what's going on.
And
So,
you feel like you belong.
right. So there's a function for Jewish liturgy that goes beyond like these universal prayers. It's like a communal function. And this was very important to the rabbis that created the Siddur, because, and we know that from the whole idea of a minyan, which the rabbis say it's from the Torah, but how do they get it in a very, very creative way from the Torah. It's not obviously in the Torah. They get it from when Abraham argued God down to how many righteous people were needed to be in Sodom to save the city. And God stopped it at 10. That's where we get minyan from. And the rabbis take it from there and say, look, it's in the Torah that you need a minyan to say certain prayers. But let's come back to these. Let's do a little, it's 2:00, so we just have a few more minutes. But
Okay. Sorry.
let's look a little bit at a document that I'm going to email you.
Hope I get it.
Well, I can't do anything about that, Ruthie.
I know. Well, I finally got Norm's email. It takes 10 minutes. I just figured that one out.
I'm going to share my
I'll drive
screen.
faster next time.
So this is from a book called My People's Prayer Book, Volume 1, the Shema and its Blessings. It's a series of, I don't know, I think 9 or 10 books that covers every aspect of Jewish liturgy. It's a great series. I've got a couple. I'm hoping to get the rest of them, the ones that I don't have. What it does is each one's about a different section of the liturgy, such as this volume 1's about Shema and its blessings. It has some introductory essays, and then it goes through and it puts the text of the prayers. And it has probably 10 different rabbis or pairs of rabbis write commentaries on it from different perspectives. So it's not like a quick front page to last page read, but it's a great resource. But this is a really useful introduction that we're not going to read now, but I'm going to send it to you. You can read it if you'd like.
That looks into it.
But it has some great charts in it that I want to look at with you. So let's look at this one. So this is talking about the morning service. And this gives you a structure. And the structure, we'll talk about, like the evening service is not that different. The morning service is the most complete, so it's a good one to start with. So we start with some morning blessings called. You might know, like Matovu would be one of them. And then there's this series of blessings about on getting up in the morning, those kind of things. It's really about increasing your awareness of the spiritual, of making a transition from, like, best case, from sleep to having your transition from sleep to wakefulness have a spiritual element. And if not, then having your transition from regular, life that you're just like going about your business to praying, starting with a spiritual aspect of, things that are related to regular life, like eating, getting dressed, the physical space you're in, breathing, physical, regular things. So that's the first function of the first part of prayer, is making a transition from the regular or mundane into a place of holiness. Then the second part here is Pazuke de Zimra in the morning. It's verses of song. Basically, it's singing psalms of praise. Like we do that on Shabbat. Like, let me give you the equivalent would be some of the psalms that we sing in Kabbalat Shabbat. Yismechu Hashamayim, or Lichu Niranena, any of those psalms at Shabbat. And the purpose of that is, in this article, it says it's to create a sense of holy community. I'm not sure I completely agree that that's the main thing. That's definitely one thing. I think it's to raise our spirits to a place of greater holiness, to get ready for the more important things. Because the next three, these are the three pillars, the three main sections of prayer: Shema and its blessings, the Amidah, and Torah. And each one has a different purpose. Shema and its blessings are about, it's called creed here in this article, but what that means is belief. So what this is really about is it's having us incorporate into our prayers what Jewish tradition tells us Jewish beliefs are about important things. Shema and the blessed Shema, the paragraphs of Shema are quotations from the Torah. And you might argue that they're the three most important sections of the Torah to the rabbis, since they put it at the central place in the service. And we'll look more at all these things in more detail, but we're just getting the overview now. Then after that, the Amidah is where we petitions. It's where we ask for things. That said, there's stuff in the Amidah that's not asking for things, because we never want to just blurt out asking for things. We want to frame it. When I say we, what I mean is like the rabbis who created the liturgy. That's their we, not yours or mine. It might be also for us. So we've got our beliefs in the Shema and its blessings. We've got transition from regular life. We've got putting ourselves in a holier mood to get ready for the important stuff. We've got our beliefs, the Shema and its blessings. We've got our petitions, what we're asking for and what we're thankful for in the Amidah. And then we study some Torah. This is talking about on Shabbat and some of the weekdays, there's Torah reading from the scroll. This is not talking about a sermon, although we might argue that on Friday night at our temple, the sermon takes the place of this Torah. And what are we doing there? According to tradition, what we're doing there is putting us in touch with God's will for us as expressed through the words in the Torah. Does it always work? I can't answer that. Any questions, thoughts, comments on this so far here?
Are you going to email that to us, David?
I'm going to email this document to you. So,
It sort of puts a structure to the service,
yeah,
which is what we were trying to figure out when we started this class.
exactly. So this might be all we need of that. And the service that we do most at TCS is Friday night Shabbat services, and it still follows this format, more or less. Instead of the morning blessings, we've got, things like Shalom Aleichem to sort of help us with that transition from working on Friday or whatever we were doing and driving in traffic or whatever to making that transition to being in a holy space. And then we've got the Psalms in Kabbalat Shabbat take the place of Pezukei de Zimra. It might be Luchuna Ranana, it might be Yismechu Hashemayim or Ya'alo Sadai. Those are all in that series of Psalms. Then Shema and its blessings, it's largely the same. Some of the blessings are a little bit different, whether it's evening or morning or Shabbat or not, but they follow the same structure. It's just different versions of them. And we'll go over that. The Amidah, I think we talked about this a little bit last time. The beginning and end and parts of it are the same, but the middle is different if it's Shabbat or not. We'll talk about that more in detail another time. Now, Torah is an interesting thing when we're talking about Friday night services, because you might recall if you were all, well, I don't know if Norm was. Are you still here, Norm?
Yes.
Oh, okay. It's just dark. So Rabbi Ken does the sermon timing differently from our previous rabbis. Rabbi Smith and Rabbi Eric, they pretty much did their sermon after the Amidah. They followed this order. And you'll notice that it's increasing in height. That is purposeful, that it's supposed to be increasing holiness and importance. So they kept their sermon here. Even though like a sermon, technically, according to halakha and according to like a liturgist, a sermon is not the same thing as Torah reading. But they kept it in the same place, especially since we don't have a regular Saturday morning service where we do this. Rabbi Ken sees it differently. I don't know if I'm going to put words in his mouth. I don't know if I'm right, but he prefers to put to attach his sermon to something else in the service that's related to what he's talking about. He likes to attach it to either a prayer or a part of the service that's related to his topic. So that would lead me to believe that he probably doesn't see the sermon as equivalent to reading from the Torah scroll, so that it would need to be in the same place.
Didn't you say, David, that the sermon replaces, in our temple, replaces the Torah service?
No,
Oh,
I might have
Okay.
said something like that. I might have said that, but if I said that, I'm disagreeing with myself now. Um, I sort of said that, but it's a little bit more complicated. Since our temple, like in a temple, like most conservative temples, that their main service is Saturday morning, not Friday night. The rabbi usually doesn't even give a sermon on Friday night. They give their sermon on Saturday after the Torah reading or before the Torah reading, attached to the Torah reading. But since we can't do that, and we want to study some Torah and we want for there to be a sermon, it has to be on Friday night. Question is where? So our previous rabbis kept it in this order of increasing holiness and taking a part of the service that isn't in Friday night and putting it in Friday night. Rabbi Ken doesn't see it that way. He doesn't see his sermon as taking the place of Torah reading and needing to be in the same order of the service. So he attaches it to wherever there's a link elsewhere in the service that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Very much so.
I always wondered why on Friday night the sermon is not in the same place of the service.
Yeah.
And
Me too.
now you've answered it.
Yeah, that's a good learning. I was always curious about that too. Why is he doing so different?
I just wonder if he would explain it the same way.
Well, Yahweh
I don't
makes a
know,
lot of
making
sense.
it up.
Yeah, Yahweh is very spiritual and makes sense.
Rabbi, you wouldn't believe what David just said about you.
Oh, that was
So there's more that I would like to go over in this article. Feel free to read it. It's a very rich article. Next week I'd like to talk more about the Shema and its blessings, because there's more in the article about that. Specifically, what are these blessings? What are these two blessings here in this one blessing about? What are they about, and why do we make those blessings? And what prayers that in our service do they correspond to? So if you could read the article yourself to find that out in advance, or wait for us to discuss it, or both. I'll send you the article. And any final comments before we say our farewell for the week? I apologize for not starting the recording earlier. Sorry about that.
You don't have to apologize to us. We were here.
Well, I missed the beginning too, but that's.
Well, all right. Have a great week, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Very
Thank you,
impressive.
David.
This
Thank
was
you.
really very interesting. Very much so.
Interesting class today.
Glad you liked it.
And
Have a
no
great
olive
week.
bait.
Dave, would you send me another email just to see if I'm getting your emails? Just say hi,
Sure.
okay? Because I checked, I did not get it. It's like weird. I checked my junk.
Because you get my emails sometimes.
Yeah, which